The alphabet murders, also referred to as the double initial murders, representing a chilling and unsolved series of child homicides that took place between 1971 and 1973 in Rochester, New York. The case has perplexed investigators and remains one of the most haunting mysteries in American history. The victims in this case were three young girls, all aged between 10 and 11 years old. What sets these murders apart is a disturbing pattern. Each girl had a first name and a last name that began with the same letter. Moreover, after being brutally murdered, the bodies of these young victims were discovered in or near a town or village whose names also started with the same initial as the victim's name, further deepening the eerie nature of the crimes. The investigation revealed that each of the girls had been sexually assaulted before being killed through either manual or ligature strangulation, a cruel and personal method of murder. The bodies were then discarded, as if the killer was deliberately placing them in locations that would amplify the twisted significance of the matching initials. Despite extensive investigation and numerous leads over the years, the identity of the perpetrator remains unknown, and the case continues to evoke a sense of unease and sorrow in the Rochester community. At precisely 4:20 p.m. on the afternoon of November 16, 1971, a young Puerto Rican girl named Carmen Colon, who was only 10 years old, vanished while on her way home from running a simple errand in Rochester, New York. Witnesses reported that Carmen had gone into a local pharmacy on West Main Street as per her grandfather's instructions. However, upon learning that the prescription she had tasked with picking up had not yet been filled, she decided to leave the store. Before departing, she told the store owner, Jack Corbin, in an urgent manner, "I gotta go, I gotta go." Shortly after exiting the pharmacy, she was seen getting into a car that was parked in close proximity to the establishment. Carmen's disappearance prompted her family to report her missing to the Rochester Police Department at 7:50 p.m. that evening. Roughly 50 minutes after she had left the pharmacy, a number of drivers traveling along the Interstate 490 noticed distressing scenes unfolding before them. Several motorists spotted the child, visibly distressed and naked from the waist down, running away from a car that was backing up. Witnesses observed her waving her arms frantically and calling out in an attempt to attract the attention of nearby vehicles. Alarming reports surfaced indicating that one of the motorists witnessed the child being led back to her abductor's vehicle, which was suspected to be a dark-colored Ford Pinto hatchback. Tragically, the search for Carmen Colon took a grim turn just 2 days later when two teenage boys stumbled upon her partially clothed body in a gully not too far away from Interstate 490 near the village of Churchville. This location was approximately 12 miles from where she was last seen alive, heightening the horror of the situation. Investigators later found her coat discarded in a culvert roughly 300 feet away from where her body was located, and her trousers were recovered on November 30th near a service road close to the area where multiple drivers had witnessed her desperate attempt to escape her captor. The autopsy results shocked the community as they revealed that Carmen had not only been AR'd, but also endured severe trauma, including fractures to her skull and one of her vertebrae. The report further indicated that she was ultimately killed by manual strangulation. Disturbingly, her body exhibited numerous scratches, presumably inflicted by fingernails during the struggle. The brutal nature of Carmen Colon's murder, coupled with the alarming reality that no bystander had intervened to help the frightened child as she had tried to escape her abductor beside Interstate 490, ignited a wave of public outrage. In response to the tragedy, two local newspapers, the Times-Union and the Democrat Chronicle, initially collaborated to offer a combined reward of $2.5 grand for information that would lead to the arrest and conviction of the perpetrator responsible for this heinous crime. All tips and leads received by these public publications were promptly forwarded to law enforcement. In the wake of increased public concern, numerous businesses and community members began contributing additional funds to the reward, causing a total amount to rise to over $6,000. Despite the extensive investigations that followed, including interrogations of various suspects such as Carmen's uncle, law enforcement was unable to charge anyone with her murder. By December 21st, an unsettling reduction in the investigative team was made, leaving only 3 detectives assigned to the case on a full-time basis. In early 1972, in a determined effort to keep Carmen Colon's case in the public eye, 5 substantial billboards were erected along major expressways in Rochester. Each billboard measured an impressive 30 feet by 12 feet and promptly displayed an 8-foot tall image of Carmen along with the provocative headline, "Do you know who killed Carmen Colon?" The Rochester Outdoor Advertising Company generously donated the use of these billboards for 1 month. Each billboard advertised a $6,000 reward for the information that could lead to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for Carmen's tragic death, along with details of a telephone hotline and a postal address established the previous November for anonymous tips to the public. While this initiative generated several new leads, unfortunately none of them materialized into viable evidence that could advance the investigation further. 17 months after the initial event, on the evening of April 2nd, 1973, at roughly 5 p.m., 11-year-old Wanda Walkowicz vanished from the east side of Rochester while she was on her way home after running an errand. According to the owner of the delicatessen where Wanda had been sent out to make some purchases, she successfully brought the groceries she was tasked with around 5:15 p.m. After completing her shopping, she began her journey back home, walking along Conkney Avenue. Concerns escalated when her mother, Joyce Walkowicz, reported her daughter missing at 8 p.m. In response to the alarming situation, local law enforcement launched a vigorous search in hopes of finding Wanda. Nearly 50 detectives scoured several square miles around her home, the delicatessen where she had visited, and various locations near the Genesee River, a place where she often played. Despite her extensive efforts, they were unable to locate the child immediately. However, several residents of the neighborhood recalled seeing Wanda as she struggled to carry her bag of groceries, walking just north of Avenue B. Notably, 3 of her classmates observed her at that moment, noticing how she braced the bag against the face to secure her grip as a brown vehicle passed by. Tragically, Wanda's body was discovered by a police officer following the morning at 10:15 a.m. on April 3rd, lying in the base of a hillside along an access road leading to State Route 104 in Webster, situated approximately 7 miles from Rochester. The positioning of her body raised suspicions that she had been forcibly thrown into a moving vehicle, causing her body to roll down the embankment. Autopsy conducted on her remains revealed a horrifying truth. Wanda had been sexually assaulted and subsequently strangled from behind her with a ligature, which was believed to be a belt. The presence of several defensive wounds indicated that she had fought fiercely against her attacker. Alarmingly, the examination also indicated that her body had been manipulated and dressed again after her death. Furthermore, traces of semen and pubic hair were discovered on her body, along with various strands of white cat fur of her clothing, strands that were puzzling for the Walkowicz family, as they had no pet of that description. In an effort to gather information about this tragic event, investigators took a page from their approach in the case of another victim, Carmen Colon, and set up an anonymous telephone hotline. They also disseminated countless flyers throughout the Rochester area, urging the community to come forward with any relevant information. To further incentivize the public's assistance, a reward of $10,000 was announced for any information that would lead to the arrest and conviction of Wanda's murderer. Police inquiries yielded a significant eyewitness who came forward to share their account of Wanda walking home from a delicatessen on the evening of her disappearance. The individual reported seeing her standing next to a passenger door of a large brown vehicle, engaged in a conversation with the driver. However, this witness was not able to identify the occupant of the vehicle clearly, despite the fact that the sighting took place a mere 0.2 of a mile from Wanda's home. Additionally, another witness who reached out to the authorities after the anonymous hotline was established recounted seeing a man force a girl with red hair resembling Wanda into a light-colored Dodge Dart on Conkney Avenue sometime between 5:30 p.m. and 6 p.m. on the night she disappeared. Despite the mounting evidence on witness statements, the Rochester Police Department rejected any implications that a connection existed between the murders of Wanda Walkowicz and Carmen Colon. Nevertheless, a sheriff sergeant who had previously been assigned to investigate Colon's murder, a case that was still technically open but had become largely inactive, was reassigned to the dedicated task force created to investigate Wanda's tragic death. As part of the continued efforts to raise awareness about Wanda's case, in September 1973, a local television network announced its intention to air a reconstruction of events surrounding Walkowicz's abduction and later recovery of her body. This half-hour program was broadcast on October 21st and accompanied by public appeals for witnesses to step forward with any information that they might possess. While the broadcast spurred over 200 phone calls from the Rochester Police Department from the community, sadly none of the leads proved useful in breaking the case wide open. 7 months after the tragic events related to the case of Wanda Walkowicz, on the evening of November 26, 1973, an alarming report came in regarding the disappearance of an 11-year-old girl named Michelle Maenza. Her mother Carolyn raised the alarm after Michelle failed to arrive home from school when expected. Subsequent investigations into her whereabouts revealed that Michelle was last seen by her classmates at approximately 3:20 p.m. as she embarked on a solitary walk towards a shopping plaza situated close in proximity to her school. The purpose of her visit was to retrieve a purse that her mother had inadvertently left inside by one of the stores earlier that day, underscoring the innocent nature of her errand. Roughly 10 minutes after Michelle left the school, a witness reported seeing her beige and tan vehicle seated in the passenger seat as it sped down Ackerman Street before making a turn onto Webster Avenue. The clock struck 5:30 p.m. on that fateful November evening. A motorist traveling along a Route 350 spotted a man in a large beige or tan vehicle that appeared to have a flat tire. The man was holding a girl whom the motorist was almost certain that Michelle Maenza by the wrist. As the clock struck 5:30 p.m. on that fateful November evening, a motorist along the Route 350 spotted a man by a large beige or tan vehicle that appeared to have a flat tire. The man was holding a girl whom the motorist was almost certain was Michelle Maenza by the wrist. Concerned, the motorist stopped and approached the vehicle, offering assistance. However, the man reacted in a threatening manner. He aggressively grabbed the girl and pushed her behind his back, all while ensuring that his license plate was out of sight. The motorist, feeling an intense hostility emanating from the man, was so unnerved by the situation he ultimately chose to drive away instead of intervening further, an action that would later haunt him. The following morning at approximately 10:30 a.m. on November 28th, the grim discovery of Michelle's fully clothed body was made. She was found lying down, face down in a ditch alongside a rural road in Macedon, roughly 15 miles from Rochester. An autopsy conducted on her remains revealed that she had suffered extensive blunt force trauma, indicating a brutal attack. Utterly harrowing details surfaced. Michelle had been raped and then strangled from behind using a ligature, likely a thin rope. During the examination of her body, forensic investigators found numerous strands of white cat fur clinging from her clothing. This detail raised questions since the Maenza family did not own a pet with fur or that color. Additionally, leaf samples were matched from the local foliage that were found in another one of her clenched hands, suggesting that she might have been strangled at or near the scene where her body was ultimately discovered. Forensic analysis yielded crucial evidence. A partial palm print was retrieved from the area around her neck, alongside the traces of semen found in her body and underwear. The scientific evaluation of the semen indicated that Michelle had been sexually assaulted by a single individual. In a chilling revelation, an examination of the contents of Michelle's stomach revealed remnants of a hamburger and onions, indicating that she had eaten shortly before the time of her murder, approximately 1 hour earlier. This finding corroborated earlier witness accounts of a girl fitting Michelle's description seen in the company of a Caucasian man with dark hair, aged between 25 and 35 years, who was around 6 feet and weighing about 165 pounds. Witnesses had spotted this man with Michelle at a fast food restaurant in Penfield around 4:30 p.m. and again on Route 350 a little over an hour later. These details painted a terrifying picture and raised urgent questions about who might have been responsible for this horrific crime. Carmen Colon, Wanda Walkowicz, and Michelle Maenza were each lovingly interred at the Serene Holy Sepulchre Cemetery near Rochester. The funeral arrangement for Colon took place on November 22nd, 1971. On that solemn day, a touching funeral mass was held, drawing a significant gathering of around 200 heartbroken friends and family members who came to pay their respects and say their final goodbyes. Wanda Walkowicz's final resting place was prepared on April 6, 1973. Her service was distinguished by a small yet elegant casket adorned by white and gold, which served as a poignant symbol for her memory. The ceremony was led by the Reverend Benedict Ehrman, who provided comfort words to the attendees and honored Walkowicz's life with reverence and compassion. Michelle Maenza's funeral took place at the Corpus Christi Church on December 1st, 1973. An open casket service was held, allowing many grieving mourners to gather and share their sorrow as they remembered her life and joy she brought to those around her. The outpouring of support and love was evident as scores of individuals came together to honor her memory. At the conclusion of the heartfelt service, Michelle's father, Christopher Maenza, addressed the attendees with a poignant reflection stating, and I quote, "She was a sweet little girl. She didn't fight much," end quote, encapsulating the essence of Michelle's gentle spirit. The tragic murders of three young girls sparked an overwhelming wave of public outrage and garnered significant media attention. In the wake of Michelle Maenza's abduction and subsequent murder, investigators took the proactive step of releasing a composite sketch that depicted an individual who had been seen in the company of Michelle by multiple witnesses. This release aims to assist the public in identifying potential leads in the case. To further facilitate the search for the elusive perpetrator, who authorities believe was likely responsible for all three homicides, investigators established a dedicated telephone hotline specifically for tips related to the case. Assurance of anonymity was once again extended to anyone willing to come out with information, and a reward was also announced for the details that would lead to the arrest and conviction of the individual responsible for these heinous acts. Despite these concerted efforts, which stimulated a high volume of calls from well-meaning members of the public, no credible suspects emerged from the information provided. In the quest for justice, investigators conducted thorough investigations of over 800 individuals who were considered potential suspects in connection with what came to be known as the alphabet murders. Regrettably, the perpetrator or perpetrators of these chilling crimes was never apprehended, leaving the case in a state of unresolved tragedy. Interestingly, the three young victims shared several commonalities. They each came from economically disadvantaged Catholic families, had limited social circles, and had recently faced challenging circumstances such as experiences of bullying or difficulties in their academic lives. These have led investigators to considering troubling possibilities regarding the nature of the killings' connections to the victims. There was a prevailing theory that the individuals responsible for these murders may have ties to a social service agency, which could have enabled them to gain the trust of young girls and initiate contact with them. This chilling notion raises questions about the intersections of societal vulnerability and the tragic events that unfolded. The tragic cases of the three young victims all involved pre-adolescent females who went missing under eerily similar circumstances in Rochester. Each disappearance occurred during the early afternoon hours on days characterized by either light or heavy rainfall. Following their abductions, the bodies of the girls were discovered in nearby towns, close to expressways that were typically accessible by vehicle. Disturbingly, the remains of each child were either found fully clothed or partially clothed at the locations that suggested they had been forcibly thrown from or carried away from a vehicle that was discarded. In terms of physical characteristics, each of the victims was notably short in stature. Furthermore, it was both tragic and distressing to note that all three girls had suffered the unspeakable violation of rape prior to being brutally strangled to death. Additionally, all three children were known to be somewhat marginalized among their peers, often perceived as lonely outcasts. A deeper investigation into the circumstances surrounding their final moments revealed intriguing details. An analysis of the stomach contents from both Walkowicz and Maenza indicated that the girls had consumed food shortly before their untimely deaths, food that neither of them is known to have eaten prior to their disappearance. Moreover, forensic evidence suggested that the bodies of the two girls had been redressed after death, adding another layer of complexity to the investigation. Both contemporary and more recent investigators have expressed skepticism regarding the idea that the victims were randomly chosen based on the double initials of their names. They argue that such a rationale would be exceedingly unlikely. It would necessitate that the perpetrator stalked each victim for an extended period, which would inherently increase the risk of detection. Furthermore, while some investigators theorize that the murders of Walkowicz and Maenza may have been committed by the same individual who lured them into their tragic fates, they also strongly contend that the different modus operandi observed in their murder of Carmen Colon points to the involvement of someone familiar to her, possibly even related, rather than the stranger who abducted her by force. This crucial distinction underscores the complexity of the cases and highlights the urgent need for continued investigation for these heinous crimes. In the investigation surrounding the tragic murder of Carmen Colon, her uncle Miguel Colon has emerged as a prominent and compelling suspect in the case. Miguel, who was Carmen's paternal uncle, had established a relationship with her mother, Guillermina, following the separation of Carmen's parents, which may have complicated the family dynamics involved in this distressing situation. Generally, it was customary for Carmen to walk to the local pharmacy to retrieve her prescriptions for her family, and during these outings she was usually accompanied by her grandfather Felix. However, on that fateful day when she went missing, Carmen expressed a long desire to venture to the pharmacy on her own, a request that her grandparents reluctantly granted. Remarkably, just a few weeks before Carmen's abduction and subsequent murder, it came to light that Miguel had purchased a vehicle that bore a striking resemblance to one of the described by eyewitness as having been driven in reverse to the Interstate 490 in pursuit of Carmen. In the aftermath of a murder, investigators promptly searched Miguel's car, only to discover that the interior and exterior had been meticulously cleaned. Additionally, they found that the trunk had been treated with a potent cleaning solution. Further inquiry into the dealership which had sold the vehicle to Miguel revealed that the trunk had not undergone any cleaning with detergent prior to the sale. Moreover, a doll that belonged to Carmen was discovered in Miguel's car. However, Carmen's family members involved investigators that she had often used this vehicle, suggesting she had inadvertently left her toy behind during one of her rides. Adding to the suspicious circumstances, a friend of Miguel reported just 2 days after the death of his niece, Miguel had confided that he was contemplating leaving the country, admitting that he had done something wrong in Rochester. In a swift manner, he relocated Rochester to Puerto Rico, only 4 days after Carmen's tragic murder. In March 1972, investigators traveled to San Juan, Puerto Rico with the intention of questioning Miguel. However, local newspapers published articles about the police plans, prompting Miguel to evade law enforcement authorities. Ultimately, he surrendered on March 26 and agreed to be extradited back to Rochester to face questioning regarding his potential involvement. Upon questioning, Miguel Colon was unable to provide a credible alibi for his actions on the day of his niece's death. No one was able to corroborate his claims regarding his whereabouts during that critical time, despite the significant circumstantial evidence suggesting Miguel's culpability. Investigators were unable to find any physical evidence linking him directly to the crime scene or his vehicle in relation to Carmen's murder. Tragically, Miguel Colon's life came to a premature end in 1991, where he died by suicide at age 44. This occurred following a violent incident involving domestic abuse in which he shot and injured both his wife and brother. His death marked a somber conclusion to a life filled with turmoil and unresolved questions surrounding Carmen's murder. One prominent individual regarded as a key suspect in connection with the notorious alphabet murders is a 25-year-old firefighter from Rochester named Dennis Termini. Termini had gained infamy as a prolific serial offender, often referred to as a garage rapist, as he was linked to a disturbing string of crimes involving at least 14 assaults on teenage girls and young women during these times, 1971 to 1973. According to the suspicion surrounding him, Termini owned a beige vehicle that closely matched the descriptions provided by several eyewitnesses who had observed the abductions. Furthermore, he has resided on the location on Box Street, which is alarmingly close to the vicinity where Michelle Maenza was last seen alive, heightening concerns about his potential involvement in these heinous acts. In a series of troubled events that unfolded shortly after the last of the victims from the alphabet murders was discovered, Termini attempted to abduct a teenage girl at gunpoint on January 1st, 1974. Fortunately, he fled the scene. The terrified girl refused to be silenced by her screams. Shortly afterwards, he tried to take another potential victim. However, this time he was pursued by law enforcement, which led to a tragic conclusion. Termini took his own life by shooting himself in the head. In the wake of his death, investigators conducted a forensic analysis of Termini's vehicle and discovered traces of white cat fur in the upholstery, which could potentially be related to one of the investigations. Many years later, in January 2007, the case took a new turn when Termini's body was exhumed to obtain a DNA sample for comparison against the semen samples that had been recovered from the body of Wanda Walkowicz. After a thorough examination, the results of this DNA test conclusively confirmed that Termini was not responsible for a murder. However, it's important to note that no physical evidence have been found from the remains of either Carmen Colon or Michelle Maenza that could be utilized for DNA comparison with the Termini's genetic material, leaving those cases unresolved in the absence of definitive evidence. Another individual who had been implicated in the unsolved alphabet murders is the notorious serial killer Kenneth Bianchi. In the time of these heinous crimes were taking place, Bianchi was employed as an ice cream vendor in Rochester, which positioned him in proximity to the locations where the first two victims were discovered. In January 1976, he made the decision to leave Rochester and move to Los Angeles, California. It was during these times of 1977-1978 that Bianchi, in collaboration with his cousin Angelo Buono Jr., perpetrated a series of brutal murders known as the Hillside Strangling Killings, claiming the lives of 10 girls and young women whose ages ranged from merely 12 years old to 28 years old. Despite being a person of interest in the alphabet murders, Bianchi was never formally charged with the connection of these cases. He had consistently denied any involvement and has adamantly proclaimed his innocence regarding these horrific events. Furthermore, Bianchi had made numerous attempts to persuade law enforcement officials to officially exonerate him and remove him from the list of potential suspects. It is noteworthy, however, that during this time in Rochester, he was known to operate his vehicle that was identical in color and model to one that has been spotted near one of the sites where abductions occurred. This detail added a layer of intrigue and potential connections to the ongoing mystery surrounding the alphabet murders. In April of the year 2011, law enforcement officials arrested a 77-year-old man named Joseph Nasso in Reno, Nevada. He was accused of being responsible for the murders of 4 women in California, in which these heinous crimes had been taking place over an extensive period from 1977 to 1994. All of these victims are believed to be engaged in prostitution, and intriguingly, each woman's surname was reported to begin with the same letter as her first name, leading to the case referred to as the alphabet murders. Joseph Nasso was originally from New York, but during the early 1970s he had lived in Rochester, New York. It is noted that Nasso frequently traveled between New York and California, which may have contributed to his ability to evade authorities for many years. Initially, investigators identified Nasso as a person of interest in the ongoing investigation into the alphabet murders. However, the subsequent DNA testing played a crucial role in the case, determining whether Nasso's DNA did not match the semen samples that had been collected from the body of Wanda Walkowicz, one of the victims. As the case progressed, Joseph Nasso was brought to trial on June 18, 2013, facing charges related to the murders of 4 women from California who fell victim to his alleged crimes. Following a series of proceedings, Nasso was found guilty of each murder on August 20th of the same year, with the jury reaching a unanimous verdict. Subsequently, on November 22, 2013, he received a formal sentencing to death, marking a significant moment in the long and troubling case that had taunted both law enforcement and the communities affected for decades. In the year 1995, Miguel Colon, the mother of the tragic murder victim Carmen Colon, publicly spoke out for the first time about the heartbreaking loss of her daughter. During an interview with Jack Jones, a reporter from the Democrat and Chronicle, she expressed her deep anguish over her daughter's death and enduring pain that had haunted her since. Despite having faced a lifelong struggle with poverty, she conveyed that one desire she held in her heart above all else was not for riches or material wealth. Instead, it was simply to learn the identity of the person who had brutally taken her daughter's life. In a poignant statement, she revealed, "If I could die knowing who killed my Carmencita, I could die more peacefully than I have ever lived. It is the one thing that I want in my life. Note that this person had to pay for the terrible things he did to my little girl. If the person who did this could have any compassion, he could see the pain and suffering that the families of these little girls had endured all this time." End quote. Her words captured a profound grief and unresolved anguish that accompanied her loss, highlighting the relentless longing for justice that permeated her life. In a further effort to bring attention to the unsolved alphabet murders, the Democrat and Chronicle undertook the initiative of publishing a series of detailed articles in 2009. These pieces focused on the ongoing investigation by local law enforcement and aimed to solicit help from the public in hopes of closing the case. The response to these articles was significant, as the Rochester Police Department received around 20 new leads that could potentially aid the investigation. Although authorities diligently pursued each lead, unfortunately none of them had led to the capture and conviction of the individual or individuals responsible for these heinous crimes. Nevertheless, a representative from the Rochester Police Department reiterated their unwavering commitment to solve this tragic case, demonstrating that, despite the challenges faced, they can continue to work tirelessly in the pursuit of justice for Carmen Colon and the other innocent victims.